Hey guys, it's Kendall Bonner, your broker owner here at Remax Capital Realty, and today we're going to be reviewing the FARBAR4 contract, sections 9, 12, and additional terms. Okay, so in our previous classes we've talked about the as-is contract and how it's different from the FARBAR4, and they're pretty much identical other than 3 paragraphs. Under the as-is contract, you have between the FARBAR4 and as-is, you have paragraphs 9, paragraph 12, and then in as-is you have 18X, and that does not exist in the FARBAR4. So today we're going to just talk about the FARBAR4 and how it's different from our as-is contract. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull up our contract here and review it. We're going to start at page 12. I'm sorry, paragraph 12, which is starts on page 5. So we'll scroll all the way down. You might also want to pull out your highlighter as you review an actual contract with me. So let's talk about some of the differences between these. So as you know from the as-is contract, paragraph 12 is very short, right? I think it's like 2 or 3 paragraphs. And if you look here, paragraph 12 is actually like 2.5 or at least 1 or 2 pages now. Yeah, basically equivalent of 2 pages, which is much longer. So as you can see, the as-is contract is about 11 pages, 11 or 12 pages, and the FARBAR4 is 13 pages long, and it's because of the additional terms written in paragraphs 9 and paragraph 12. So let's start at the top and let's go over that and read through. Make sure we're all on the same page and we understand. Because it's really important. As I've always said, I do not want you to be sheep, right? So I don't want you using the FARBAR4 if you don't know how to actually use it. And I noticed that some of you guys are using the FARBAR4, but not as correctly as you, or not as strategically as you could be using it. Okay. So let's start with paragraph A of 12A here. Buyer shall have fill in the blank days after effective date within which buyer may at buyer's expense conduct some inspections. So you've got 3 different inspections listed out here: general, WDO, and permit inspections. A change here from previous contracts like the FARBAR3 is before you didn't have a blank here. You could it automatically was 15 days. Now you get to pick how many days you want. So we're just going to say 10 for the purposes of this particular class. And what's our rule here? Never leave a blank even though it has default language, because if someone goes behind you and changes it, you probably won't notice it. So it's better to put something there, even if it is the default days of 15. So if the buyer fails to timely deliver to seller written notice or report required by A, B, or C below, which is your, or B, C, and D, I'm sorry, below, which is your general repair, your WDO inspection, and your permit inspection, then other than the seller's continuing maintenance requirement, buyer shall have waived seller's obligation to repair, replace, treat, or remedy the matters not inspected and timely reported. So why is this important? Let me give you an example. Permits. Who's responsible for pulling permits, guys? It's not the title company. As we're just seeing here, it is the buyer, right? The buyer may, at buyer's expense, conduct a permit inspection. So what normally happens, though, is all parties allow the title company to do what's called a utility lien search. And when they do their utility lien searches, a lot of the third parties that these title companies hire to do that will also do a permit search. And when do we normally get those reports, guys? Usually, what, like a week or 2 before closing? Because the title companies wait until the last minute, so they'll have to spend money on files that aren't closing. But by then, usually you're outside of this date here. And just like the as-is contract, once your inspection period is over, you've now accepted the property as is. Okay? So that's really, really important. You've now waived any rights to have the seller do anything if you don't do the inspections and then notice them about that. So if this contract does not close, buyer shall is an obligation, repair all damage to property resulting from the buyer's inspections, return property to its pre-inspection condition, and provide seller with paid receipts for all work done on the property upon its completion. Okay, I think I've already told you in another class a story I had as a listing agent where the buyer's inspector flooded the seller's home and had to actually pay to have the property cleaned up. It was not a fun experience to have to go through that, but it happens. So B, let's talk about the general inspection. Those items specified in 12B2 below, which seller is obligated to repair or replace, may be inspected by a person who specializes and holds an occupational license, if required by law, to conduct home inspections, or who holds a Florida license to repair and maintain the items inspected. So basically you need a professional inspector. Buyer shall, obligation, within the inspection period, inform the seller of any general repair items that are not in the condition required by B2 below by delivering to seller a written notice, and upon written request by seller, a copy of the portion of the inspector's report dealing with the items. So this paragraph is telling us a couple things. One, we need an actual home inspector, a professional inspector, as opposed to someone who is wants to inspect their own house, for example. So this is important to make sure that you tell your customers, if you're using this contract, they better hire someone, or you need to add language in your additional terms that allows the seller to self-inspect, which I will explain that to you, how you do that, and give you the language for it. It's also telling us that the buyer has to let the seller know of any repairs within the inspection period. So it's not after the inspection period is over, which is the case in the CRSP 14, but actually within the inspection period. So if you got 10 days or 15 days by midnight on that last day, unless it falls on holiday, then it rolls, or a federal holiday or a weekend, it rolls to the following business day. We talked about that in another class. And as you can see over here, I have deadlines. I think it's actually under here, where I have the federal holidays, a list of them in there for you. Then it ends 5 p.m. the following business day. So they've got to let them know in writing what the inspection requests are. Also, the seller is only obligated to repair or replace certain items that are enumerated here. So let's get into that. So how does that work? Property condition. The following items shall be free of leaks, water damage, or structural damage. Ceiling, roof, fascia and soffits, exterior and interior walls. So now we've got structural damage, water damage, and leaks, right? So what doesn't that say? Cracks in the wall, paint, stuff like that. Doors, windows, and foundation. The above items, together with the pool equipment, and non-leased major appliances, heating, cooling, mechanical, electrical, security, sprinkler, septic, plumbing systems, and machinery, seawalls, and dockage are and shall be maintained until closing in, quote, working condition, which is defined below. We'll get to that. Torn screens. So, mind you, when it says working condition, not good condition, not pristine condition, not exceptional or excellent condition, just working condition. Torn screens, including pool and patio screens, fogged windows, and missing roof tiles or shingles, shall be repaired or replaced by seller prior to closing. So this is where torn screens become important, and mind you, I do know it doesn't say missing screens, it just says torn screens. So that's a question. Maybe we'll answer that as we move along, if that would be considered a general repair item if it was a missing screen as opposed to a torn screen. So seller is not required to repair or replace cosmetic conditions unless the cosmetic conditions resulted from a defect in an item the seller is actually obligated to repair or replace. So let's learn now what is working condition. Working condition means operating in the manner in which the item was designed to operate. So it's got to function, it's got to work. That's it. Doesn't mean it has to work well or be pretty, just that it has to work. Okay? Cosmetic conditions means aesthetic imperfections that do not affect working condition of the item, including but not limited to pitted marcite, tears, worn spots, discoloration of floor coverings. So hey, if the carpet is torn or worn, that's cosmetic. Wallpapers, window treatments, nail holes, scrapes, scratches, dents, chips, caulking in ceilings, walls, flooring, tile fixtures and mirrors, and minor cracks in walls, floor tiles, windows, driveways, sidewalks, pool decks, and garage and patio floors. Okay, cracked roof tiles, curling or worn shingles, or limited roof life shall not be considered defects. Seller must repair or replace so long as there's no evidence of actual leaks, leakage, or structural damage. So, cracked roof tiles, guys, or curled shingles are not required defects. So this is some basic stuff, guys. I mean, this is why it's so important, I feel, to use this kind of contract as opposed to as is. It's really not that scary once you understand what you're actually obligating the seller to do. Because look, a lot of the stuff the seller can tell you if that stuff exists or not because it's pretty enumerated. I mean, it's pretty basic. So now it's just a matter of having the conversation with the seller and you can even turn this into a checklist and ask the seller, do you have this, 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 or this, or this? And if they say at the listing no, then you don't need an as-is contract. You can use a traditional contract here, like the FARBAR4, which encourages a buyer to write offers feeling like the seller is going to help or make repairs, and you might offer some better opportunities for a seller strategically. Okay, so general property repairs. Seller is only obligated to make such general repairs as are necessary to bring the items into the condition specified in 12B2 above, which is working condition. Seller shall, within 10 days after receipt of buyer's notice or the inspection report, either have the reported items to general repair item, the reported repairs to general repair items estimated, and a copy delivered to the buyer, or have a second inspection. So look, even the seller gets an opportunity to have their own inspection if they like, if they don't believe that the estimates are fair, that these things actually need repairs. If the buyer or seller's inspection reports differ and the parties cannot resolve the differences, buyer and seller shall together choose and equally split the cost of a third inspector, whose written report shall be binding. So it's similar to like arbitration, right? It's like, hey, we'll split the baby in the middle. So sounds very fair here, don't you think? And we're compromising now. And sometimes emotionally, customers, by the time you get to third inspection, perhaps people are frustrated. But if you go over all of this in the front end with your customers and set their expectations that, hey, this is the process, this is what happens, and this is how this is going to protect you, then they're more likely to, one, engage and participate in the process in a more reasonable manner, as opposed to if you don't take the time to explain these things to them and it's just happening and they feel out of control. If it happens the way you say it's going to happen ahead of time, then it makes them feel more in control. And this is a lot easier to explain to a customer as well as the co-broke, because it's in writing already, as opposed to an as-is contract. There's no writing about anything, who does repairs, what type of repairs. It actually can leave a seller and a buyer very exposed to litigation when you guys are using the general, the as-is contract to make general property repairs. Okay, just simpler to use a document that already has a language in it necessary to protect all the parties. If cost to repair the items equals or is less than the general repair limit, which is in paragraph 9, we will get to that, seller shall have the repairs made. They got to do them. So if the general repair limit is $1,000 and the repairs come in at $1,000 or $900, the seller has to do it. There's no argument, there's no confusion, there's no stress. Just everybody knows seller's got to do it. If the cost to repair is more than that limit, then within 5 days after the party's receipt of the last estimate, a couple of things can happen. Either one, the seller can just pay it. So let's say the general repair limit's $1,000 and the repairs come out back at $1,500. Under option A, the seller just pays the $1,500 and everybody moves on and we close. Or B, buyer may deliver notice to the seller designating which repairs the buyer wants the seller to make at a cost not to exceed, in this case, example, $1,000. And then they'll agree to accept the other $500 worth of repairs in an as-is condition. Of course, subject to the seller's continuing maintenance requirement. That's paragraph 11. If neither party delivers such notice to the other, then either party can terminate the contract and the buyer gets their deposit back. So guess what? What if, under the scenario, the seller doesn't make the repairs or doesn't do the work? Then the buyer's not screwed, right? Under an as-is contract, the buyer can get screwed in that scenario. But here, the buyer has the option to cancel after the inspection period. What? How genius is that, right? It's awesome. So for those of you that are working with lots of buyers, this is the contract you should be using, but you got to understand it, okay? And make sure you add whatever protections that need to be added for the buyer, so that way they are strategically in the best position possible. So then under C, so here's where we have your WDO inspection. That's your wood destroying organisms and or termites. Again, has to be by Florida licensed pest control business. Again, how is this different than the as-is? Under the as-is contract, the buyers don't have to use licensed contractors. Hello, sellers. Do you really want to expose your house and your listing to inspections and reports by unlicensed people? I don't know that you really would. So for all those listing agents encouraging their customers to do an as-is contract, I dare say that might not always be in their best interest. They could arguably write these contracts up to work in their best interest as well. All these contracts with the right addendum or the right language can really work to either party's advantage as long as you understand what you're doing. So they're determining whether there's past or present WDO infestations and damage. Again, during the inspection period, the buyer's got to tell the seller, hey, we've got evidence of WDO. And it also defines what that is. So let's say a seller or a buyer says, hey, you've got mold. Some might try to argue that certain types of mold count as WDO. It's not actually listed in here, but it's got wood decaying fungi. So wood decaying fungi counts, even if you forgot your mold addendum, for example. But otherwise, you would definitely want to add the mold addendum too, just in case. So the repairs. The seller, if the seller previously treated the property, they don't have to retreat the property if there's no visible live infestation. And seller's costs can transfer to the buyer the warranty, right? Sellers shall, within 10 days after receipt of their report, have the damage estimated by appropriately licensed person. Okay, again, sellers have to now use licensees to get stuff done. Hello, buyers. Again, are you sure you want to be using the as-is contract asking for repairs, and there's nothing in there about repairs, so therefore the seller has the right to use whoever they want. They could do the work themselves. Does your buyer really want to buy a house where the seller went in and has a uncle who's an electrician, retired, and does the work themselves because they mentored under their uncle for a few years, but they're not licensed? For example, this is what we're subjecting our customers to by not using this contract and by using the as-is contract. So once I have the damage estimated, I'm now on line 310 to orient you. The necessary corrective treatment, if any, estimated by the inspector, a copy should be delivered to the buyer. Seller shall have the treatments and repairs made according to 12F below, up to the repair limit. If the cost to treat and repair exceeds the limit, so again, we'll use our $1,000 example. If it's costs more than $1,000, then the seller, the buyer may deliver written notice to the seller agreeing to pay the excess or designating which WDO repairs the seller shall make and accepting the balance. Or either party may cancel if the buyer does not deliver any notices to the seller. So notice the seller doesn't just have the right to make all the repairs, even above the limit. Basically, they leave it up to the buyer. And the point is that it's up to the buyer to say, well, hey, I'll pay the excess, or I'll accept the damage as is. So let's just read that again so we're all clear. Buyer may deliver written notice to the seller agreeing to pay the excess or designating which repairs the seller shall make, not to exceed the repair limit, and accept the balance of the property in its as-is condition with regards to the WDO infestation and damage. Again, subject to the continuing maintenance requirement in paragraph 11. Again, if the buyer does not deliver such written notice to the seller, then either party may terminate the contract and the buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing the buyer and seller from all further obligations under this contract. All right. Next, inspection and closeout of building permits. Permit inspection. Buyer may have an inspection and determine an examination of records and documents made to determine whether there exist any open or expired building permits or unpermitted improvements to the property. This is their permit inspection. So it's may, so it's not an obligation, it is an option, or it's really an option. They can do it or they cannot do it, okay? Buyer shall, within the inspection period, deliver notice to the seller, written notice, if there's any permit issues. So if they're going to request permit issues be repaired, they have to do it again within the inspection period, not after, but within. So again, this is why it's so important that the buyer get this done on the front end. And we've learned they can do that quickly online because a lot of the permitting statuses are online for each of the counties. Hillsborough County has one, Pasco County, etc. And all you gotta do is Google permits and the county you're in, and then it'll take you to the site, and then you put in the address, and it'll tell you if there's any permits. And just to show you how easy it is, let's see if we can do it. Pasco permits search. And so I think we can go to this one here. And I just want to search permit records. We're down here. And we're going to put in one of my old houses because I know what we had permits pulled. Hunt them down. Search. Are we in Pasco, Florida? Yeah, we are. Schedule. I don't want to schedule. Oh, start dates. My dates are, I need to go back. So we're going to go back to, I think we did our pool in 2013, so we'll just go back to January 2012. Oh, why won't it change? All right. And we're going to search. Alrighty, see, so here we can see there were some permits back in 2013, their record numbers and their statuses are complete. Yay, yippee. Means they're closed out. So not too bad, not too difficult. They've obviously changed the website some because I forgot about, I never saw that before, the date section, but that's fine. Just pick a date as long as the sellers own it, or go back 10 years or however long, and you're looking for, in Pasco County at least, for it to say complete here. All right, so super easy. Alrighty, so that's what you need to advise your customers to do, is go Google it. Don't you do it for them. I mean, you can do it, but I would not comment on the statuses and giving them advice on whether a status is satisfied or not. If they have questions on what a status means, if it doesn't say complete, they need to call the county and find out. Okay? So, closeout of building permits. Seller shall, within 10 days after receipt of the buyer's permit inspection notice, have an estimate of cost to remedy those permit inspection items and deliver that to a buyer. No later than 5 days prior to closing date, seller shall, up to the permit limit, have open and expired building permits identified by the buyer or known to seller closed by the applicable governmental entity, and obtain and enclose any required building permits for improvements to the property. So if there's any, like that pool permit that we were just looking at, let's say it didn't say complete, it was still open, I, as a seller, would be required to get that closed out before closing on the property, at least 5 days before closing. Prior to the closing date, seller will provide buyer with any written documentation that all open and expired building permits identified by the buyer or known to the seller have been closed out, and the seller has obtained required building permits for improvements to the property. So what does that mean? So when the seller does those conversions, like, or let's say a roof repair, because we know that you need a permit for a roof. And I'm sorry for that noise, guys. Like, my phone is blowing up, but I can't pause the recording. Otherwise, it'll make me start. I have to start all over again, and I don't want to do that. So these people will have to wait. I'll call them back later. So anyhow, if improvements were made to the house that required building permits, the seller has to let the buyer know that they've actually obtained all the proper permits and that they were closed out. If final permit inspections cannot be performed due to delays by the governmental entity, closing date shall be extended for up to 10 days to complete such final inspections, failing which either party may terminate the contract, and the buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing the buyer and the seller from all further obligations under this contract. Now, agents, how many different times have I now said, if this doesn't happen, either party can cancel and the buyer can get their deposit back? And we're now talking about dates post inspection period. So we all know under the as-is contract, they can't get their money back after the inspection period is over for any issues associated with the house, other than really financing is the biggest one, where they could again get, there's very few contingencies, I guess is the point, that are beneficial to the buyer. Here, I've already told you 3 potential opportunities after the inspection period that the buyer can still get out of the contract and get their EMD back. So these are some really powerful negotiating tools and protections for your customer that, you know, if your customer knew that you knew about this contract and you weren't using it and you pushed them into another contract that didn't offer these protections, I mean, I don't even want to guess what kind of legal implications those could have. So I always recommend never push any one contract on the customer, but understand your contract so you can share with them the pros and cons of each and how to strategically use them, and then let them pick which contract they want to use, because then you are not responsible at that point. You know what I'm saying? I hope you guys are starting to hear me and get what I'm trying to do to help make you a more powerful agent and a more powerful negotiator. Knowledge is power, guys. So if the cost to close at open or expired building permits or to remedy any permit violation exceeds the permit limit, then within 5 days after the party's receipt of the estimates, seller may elect to pay the excess, or buyer may deliver notice to seller accepting the property as is condition with regards to the building permit status and agreeing to receive credit from the seller at closing in the amount of the permit limit. Now, this is different than B is different than in the other remedies for the other inspectable items for example, for WDO and general repair. This is the only one that looks like that offers a closing credit, which again, that may or may not work depending on the buyer's type of loan. So some lenders cap the credits and don't allow the sellers to take back cash beyond their EMD, for example. If neither party delivers such written notice to the other, then either party may terminate. So again, if you're looking to get out of a contract because the buyer changed their mind, you just wait this out, because I'm telling you, most agents don't read their contracts and don't know they have to do written notices, and they never do. And then guess what? Time goes by. Hey, buyer, we can get out now because the seller didn't, do their part. So, let's get out of the contract now. So again, we've got another potential way to get out of contract. And then on the selling side, let's say a seller has a backup contract that they really want to take and they're trying to get out of this first contract, and the buyer doesn't do what they're supposed to do. Guess what? Now the seller has some options. And remember, neither party has to cancel. It just, now you have an option to. Okay, so just some food for thought. And under this case, if either party terminates, buyer gets their EMD back and everybody's released and they get to all go home. Walkthrough inspections and reinspection. This paragraph and F, well, E should be the same as the as is. F, repair standards. All repairs and replacements shall be completed in a good and workmanlike manner by an appropriately licensed person in accordance with all requirements of law, and shall consist of materials or items of quality, value, capacity, and performance comparable to or better than that existing as of the effective date. Except as provided in paragraph C2, at buyer's option cost, seller will at closing assign all assignable repair, treatment, and maintenance contracts and warranties to the buyer. So what was C2? Let's go back up and remind ourselves. That was for the WDO repairs, okay, which had its own language there. So this is all huge, guys. That's not in your as-is contract. There's a lot of good material here that even if you just isolated those two paragraphs to give to your customers as the buyer or the seller, so that they're not afraid of this contract and recognize the value of these protections and these options and opportunities, that goes a long way with educating your customer and will truly set you apart from your competition. So now let's go to paragraph 9, which is on page 3. And this is where we talk about the limits. So this is the other paragraph that's different in the as-is contract. So like, for example, this section right here in particular is gone. So lines 131 to 136, that is not in the as-is contract. And just to kind of show you, hold on. Actually, let's close this. I'm gonna do this and pop it out. And then I'm going to go back here and open up this. So let's pull our pop-up back. So here is the as-is contract. And I just want to show you paragraphs 9 and 12, even though that's in a different class and we already went over it. I just want to show you how it looks different. See? So that whole section is gone. And here we have the paragraph referencing the as-is maintenance requirement, which over here is again after that section. Here's a maintenance requirement here. And now this is different too, and this actually has a different impact in paragraph 8, I mean in FARBAR 4 than it does in the as-is contract, which again could have some ramifications for a customer. But and so you can see this is much shorter. So again, that's why we have 12 pages over here and 13 here. So these are our repair limits. So we can put numbers. We can put $1,000 or 1.5%, whatever you like. Don't put both. Pick one. What I usually do, a lot of people will make it the same all the way down. I disagree with that. You know, 1.5% of a $250,000 contract is you now, like, this compounds. It's not all one. So it doesn't mean it's truly 1.5%. Now you're dealing with 4.5% worth of repairs that you're obligating your customer to. So you know, I would say, hey, let's put 1% here. It just depends on the house, what you think needs to be done. For WDO, I just want to make sure if I need to get this house tinted, it's going to be expensive, so I might put $2,500. And then for permits, hey, I don't really expect a lot of permit issues, but I want the seller to, you know, contribute at least $500 towards that. They don't all have to be 1%, 1%, 1%, or 500, 500, 500, or 1,000, whatever number. Mix it up. Use your brain. Ask the buyers. You know, if there's repairs, how much money do you want to obligate the seller? Let's be fair to them. Now, strategically, I often, even as a listing agent, would do 0. Now, let me tell you how 0 works, because 0 can work awesomely if you, again, understand this contract. So let's say you put all your repair limits at 0, because the seller, you're going to say, hey, seller, we don't want to necessarily ask you to make any repairs. We don't think there's really going to be any issues. But just in case there are issues, we want options, right? And we don't want the contract to die at the end of the inspection period. We want time to work that out. So the way paragraph 9 and 12 work together is, let's say there's a roof repair needed or requested for $1,000. Well, if you recall, that exceeds the repair limit, which is 0, right? So if that's the case, what happens? What do you guys think happens? So let's go to paragraph 12 so we can talk about that a little bit, because this is huge. So let's say it's 0 and there's the roof repair needs to happen. So that we got to go to page 6 here where it talks about the repairs. So remember, we should have, so within 10 days after receipt of the buyer's notice, the seller either has to get an estimate and deliver a copy, or get a second inspection, or if it's so basically they have to get an estimate first. Okay, so they either get an estimate or get a second inspection, and that's 10 days. So now our 10-day inspection has turned into a 20-day ordeal, right? Potentially, or less. And then if the cost to repair is $1,000, and that's more than the general repair limit, which was 0, then another 5 days after that, the seller can say, okay, I'll pay the $1,000 and keep the buyer in the contract. Buyer does not have the right to walk just because it has a 0 repair limit. They have to make the repair request, and the seller has to accept or deny. They have to do something. So if the seller says, I'm going to pay and I'm going to do it, the buyer does not have the right to walk. Now, if the seller says it doesn't deliver that notice, then the buyer can deliver notice to the seller saying, hey, how about you just do $500 of repairs, and there's room to negotiate. Or, hey, 0, you can make 0 the repairs. I'm going to accept the house as is, and I'm going to move on. We're going to move on with the closing. Okay, so now you've got some options. And then option C is if neither party gets back to the other, then either party now can cancel. So now we've added 10 days to inspection, 10 days for estimates, and 5 days for review of those estimates after receipt to actually do the repairs. And then now you can actually cancel and get your EMD back. Now, can anybody think about what things could be happening 25 days in that a buyer might change their mind or a seller might change their mind? Sure. Wouldn't it be so powerful to be able to have these options? Because I'm telling you, you guys are going to be the most educated agents out there. Very few of the other agents are actually reading and knowing how these contracts work. And so they're not going to do their written notices. So as long as you do them, or strategically have the buyer not do them, or you not do them at your customer's written direction, right? Then you will have time to cancel and get out. So, and that works with all of the different limits. So again, once we're above the limit, then the buyer has the right to cancel long after the inspection period is over. See? Lots of options here, and make sure you put 0, because if it's blank, 1.5% is automatically filled in. I hate that. I don't like that at all, but I didn't write these contracts. I don't think there should be a default in here. I think the party should have to write something in. Okay, so, and you've got limits for each one, and again, remember they compound here. So if you did 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, now you've got $3,000 worth of obligatory repairs that a seller will have to do as long as it's within those limits. Okay, $1,000 assessed to each one. So let's read. You guys remember paragraph 11 is your continuing maintenance requirement. So basically what that means is if it was broken when you went under contract on effective date, the seller is not obligated to repair it at closing. If it was working at the time of contract and it's broken before closing, the seller is obligated to fix it. Even on a short sale, guys, even on an as-is contract, it's the same in both contracts. The seller's an obligation to keep the house in the condition it was in at the time the buyer and the seller agreed to sell and purchase. Okay? Now, what is different is in this paragraph here. So let's go back to the as-is one, because I just want to show you that. If prior to closing the seller is unable to meet the as-is maintenance requirement, a sum equal to 125% of estimated repair cost to meet shall be escrowed at closing. Okay, so if the cost is $1,000, they've got to put $1,250 in escrow with the title company for the repairs. Okay, and you see here what happens. If it's less than, the seller gets their money back. If it's more, the seller still has to pay for it. So they have to pay the actual cost. All right, that's under the as is. Now under this paragraph here, this one's trickier. If the seller is unable to meet the maintenance requirement by paragraph 11, or any of the repairs, replacements, treatments, or permitting issues is required by paragraph 12, then sums equal to 125% of the estimated cost to complete those items has to be held in escrow. But I I don't know if I love or hate this, but guess it depends on what side you're on. Not in excess of applicable limits set forth above, if any. So I got zeros here. So what does that mean? I have to put 125% of zero into escrow at closing? Who likes that math? A seller. Right? The seller likes that math a lot. Because 0 times anything is what, guys? 0. So that's a flaw in this contract that could be manipulated here. But I don't know if a judge will actually still acknowledge that, but they might, because I mean it literally is, that's what it is. So that's what it says. So I don't know that a judge would overturn that. I have no idea. If actual costs of required, repairs, replacements, treatment, permitting exceed the escrowed amounts, seller shall pay the actual cost, but again, not in excess of applicable limits above. So again, not more than what? 0. So, so yeah, if you write in 0 as a buyer's agent here, our risk is that if the seller doesn't maintain the home under paragraph 11 and they don't get it fixed before closing, the buyer's going to be left with the house in the condition it's in. If you're a seller, you like zeros, you're happy, and if something breaks, you're supposed to get it fixed under paragraph 11. You're supposed to get it fixed before closing. But if for some reason you can't, arguably you may not have to pay escrow any monies for it either. So that's a little scary and a little dangerous there. Like I said, it's a flaw in the contract, but I just want to make you aware of it. So in that case, maybe it might be better for you if you're a buyer's agent to just put, $25 or $100 in each, limit. Okay. So that's the main difference in paragraph 9 for you compared to the as-is contract. And then lastly, I want to tie this all together for you guys on the last in the additional terms section. So I want you to notice there is no paragraph 18X. It ends at V, right? So there's no 18X as there is in the contract in the as-is, and I'll show you that here as well. So W is reserved, doesn't have anything, but we have 18X. Buyer waiver of claims does not exist in the FARBAR4 at all. Okay, it ends with 18V for FERPTA. Now, additional terms. This is where you guys sometimes mess up my wonderful FARBAR4 strategy. So I've already told you what I love about the as-is contract is on paragraph 12, it should be here on page 5 of your as-is contract. Oh, geez. I'm going to go to paragraph 12. My favorite line in here is, if buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the buyer is not acceptable or that the property is not acceptable to the buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice of such election to seller prior to the expiration of the inspection period. Best sentence in the whole contract. Hands down, absolutely. Who says you can't use that in your FARBAR 4? Because I don't know that I like the rest of this other stuff as if I'm representing a buyer, right? So, and it's missing all that other junk, remember? So here's that walkthrough inspection and reinspection. It's B here, and the other contract, it was way down after permits, etc., etc. So in here, this paragraph is just the seller has to assist and cooperate in helping the buyer close out building permits, but it doesn't say that the seller has to close them out themselves. In fact, the seller shall not be required to expend or become obligated to expend any money. So again, not a lot of protection here for a buyer in the as-is contract. lot more protections for the buyer in the FARBAR 4, and dare say the seller as well. So what do we do here? As you guys recall, remember I sent you, or I have in here, that lovely language for, in fact, let's do this. We're going to open up another one. We have, where's my language for business? Here we go. So over here, I've got lots of stuff in here for you. Remember those legal holidays lists I was telling you about? That's right there. So language for business. I gave all of this to you guys, and it's in here now, so you can copy and paste it. But down here, we have buyer contract language. Only use the paragraphs you need. So let's read these real quick. Seller agrees to pay up to fill in the blank, whatever you want. I'm not putting a default. Towards buyer's prepaids, closing costs, non-allowables, paid outside of closing. That's what POC stands for, paid outside of closing. Discount points and any other fees or costs. I think it's dangerous just to write closing costs. Because here, if you could do prepaids, guess what's a prepaid? Or paid outside of closing? Examples of that could be appraisals. Examples of that could be home inspections. So if you're getting money back, why not submit your home inspection bill and get that money back on as a credit towards your purchase? You know, stuff like that, guys. Or let's use the extra money towards discount points, because a lot of times buyers don't even use the entire 3% that they're requesting, and that money just goes back to the seller. But if you do discount points, hey, maybe the seller can buy down. So now you're using all the 3%, right? Everything's about strategy, guys. Here's a beauty paragraph. Buyer and seller agreed that buyer, at her or his sole discretion, may determine that the property is not acceptable to buyer, and buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice of such election and cancellation to seller on or before the expiration of the inspection period. If the buyer timely terminates this contract, the deposit shall be funded to the buyer in full, thereby releasing the buyer and seller of all further obligations under this contract. Sound familiar? Of course it is. So highlight this paragraph. You can't do it from here, sorry, because it's a PDF, but you guys all have it in Word somewhere, and we are trying to add a paragraph language section in app files, so I'll probably throw it into this part of this particular app file, and then I'm hoping one day, we've already talked to app files, that this will be a drop down menu and I can preload it with paragraphs and you guys will be able to click, 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 click. Someday that's coming. App files is already aware. We've already told them we're looking for that, and they said that is arguably within a year we could have that. But then in the meantime, you're going to have to cut and paste. Then the next couple of paragraphs are seller to provide buyer, and just for you guys' sake, on average, I usually will highlight from here all the way through here. Okay, and we'll just finish those up and I'll explain why. Seller to provide buyer with any and all HOA documents, notice of fees, contact information for association and or management company within 7 calendar days of effective date. If no association is required to exist, seller to notify buyer in writing within 7 calendar days of effective date. So I gave them deadlines, told them what I want and what I need, and I want it in writing. Seller to provide buyer with seller's prior survey within 7 days of effective date and written explanation of any changes and or exceptions to survey since last performed, if any. So this could save the buyer some money, you know, if you can get the seller to actually deliver their old survey. There's no other contractual obligation anywhere for the seller to do that, but here we've made it a obligation. If no survey is available, then seller to notify buyer in writing within 7 calendar days effective date. Again, gives you're well within hopefully a 10-15 day inspection period. You're getting this information. Now, if you shorten your inspection period, guys, like let's say you shorten it to 3 days, you need to shorten this time as well. This should not be longer than your actual inspection period, because the whole point is that you'll be able to cancel if you don't like the information you've been given here. And then seller agrees to include all current chattel in and on the property as a part of this real estate transaction. Some of you guys have used this and you didn't really understand it, and so I want to make sure everyone who listens to this particular class It's to hear me when I say, that is not a line you want to commonly use. You only use this line or paragraph when the buyer wants to keep all the seller's furniture. So they want their furniture and their art, pretty much everything except their clothes and their bed sheets. If they want to keep all of that, then you would put this line in. If they don't want it, then please don't do that, because you will freak a seller out and a listing agent out who actually reads that, especially when that's not what the buyer wants. Okay? So those of you that I know, and there's more than one of you that have used that line and didn't know what it meant, you shall remain nameless. I won't call you out here, but there was more than one of you who was using that particular line incorrectly, and there may be more of you. So I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page without embarrassing anyone. All right? So throw that language in here, and in fact, I'm going to go grab it. Because I keep my language for business right on my desktop. And so just because I told you guys I would keep this stuff in this particular up file so you can copy it, we're going to throw that in there. Oh, what happened? Oh, geez, the wrong thing got in here. Sorry, I found this really cool out of office email language that I want to incorporate in my life when I go out of town. So don't know what I did here, but ooh, let's undo. Something happened there. Okay, so copy. Let's go back in here, throw that here. And I'm gonna take this chattel language out because I don't want you, I want you to be proactive when you use that, not just copying and pasting and not thinking. So save that. And so now you've got the benefits of the as-is contract with the protections of the FARBAR4. And this makes sense to me. This is strategic, guys. This is strategy. This is innovation. This is thinking outside the box. This is better business. This is best practices. And that's what I want for you guys, okay? So I think I've pretty, hopefully I'm still recording. Yep, okay. Hopefully you guys are really learning some stuff and really understanding this. Please feel free to listen to this, and I'm sorry my voice is probably annoying for you, but please listen to this more than once. Take notes and then come to our contract mastermind groups and give me your questions. And now we can stop talking about like how to do it and speak more intelligently on being proactive and strategic and intentional with how we run our real estate business, and again, how we set ourselves apart from our competition. So I don't know that I'm going to record any more contracts classes. I think I'm going to stick with these unless you guys tell me you want a Crispy 14 class. I might have to break that up into two. But otherwise, please read your contracts, and if you have questions, let me know. And you can also put them as updates in the app file and just notice me. Okay, so if you have a question, you can create an update here and notice me somewhere, or I guess it's just only me and other commenters. And you can tag Shad in your updates and let us all know, tag all of us, and say, hey, what do I do next? Check me out. So, in fact, I'm going to do that. Check out Kendall's contract class notes and language here. And I'm just going to check all, so you guys will all get an email. Ha ha ha. Letting you know that that this exists, okay? All right. Talk to you later. Have a good one.